spend some time to talk about a very exciting new class from Professor Ann. This is something very unique, and we think it's very valuable. First of all, I'm going to ask Professor Ann why you come up the idea of offering such a class to students. So maybe from your own world, I will let the parents understand why this class and what exactly is this class.
Sure, Chai, thanks. So why this class, as you said, from part of my own world. So having been involved in admissions for well over 10 years now, not just for the Ivy League schools, my Ivy is UPenn, but also with public and private colleges, being a professor there. At the end of every application season, we informally get together. You could call it a conference, perhaps. And so, especially a lot of folks from admissions and the other Ivies will get together, and we'll kind of trade ideas and share concepts and conclusions for each application season. And the reason for this class, I think, is there's something that I've noticed that's systemic around, I'd say, the entire application pool every year. And these themes come across from all the other admissions people who talk about how the season ended up. And the main thing is there seems to be a need for guiding students who generally have pretty strong aptitudes, and they're pretty strong students overall. They learn well, but there seems to be a pretty strong need to get over that barrier to becoming an exceptional student. And so what I've noticed from interacting with so many of these other folks who are in admissions, especially with the Ivy schools, and a lot of times we'll invite, or we'll include some admissions people from some of the other colleges like MIT and Stanford and Duke, Chicago, NYU, et cetera. And these themes still come across as being the same thing: is there seems to be a barrier. What is it that is preventing students who are generally very strong students but truly becoming exceptional? If you think about these colleges, they all have about about 4 to 6% acceptance rates. So, for lack of a better way of thinking of it, to be a top 5%er, what is it that's stopping these students from? And so that's where I think, there is a need for this class, just systemically. And so to get to what is it, in terms of the class, I like to think of it as focusing on taking a student who has strong aptitude and study skills and really bringing them up to being an exceptional, a top 5%er type of student. What a lot of us notice in admissions is there really is a difference in even the way that the students seem to think and process information, how they communicate, both in their writing and their speech. So the class comprises 3 main components. The first and primary component is that it's very dynamic. It is very interactive. It's premised on 2 other components, and that's initiating and responding to things. So initiating is exactly what that means, just being able to come up with original ideas. Believe it or not, there's some students who think brainstorming is one word: Google. Okay, that's not what brainstorming is. And responding and rebutting and reacting and formulating, that's all, well, let me look at a template, or what's something that somebody else has thought of. So these are 2 of the, I'd say, fundamental areas that differentiate truly exceptional students. And it's done in a really dynamic setting. And so it's based on a lot of, there's a lot of reading and writing exercises, but a lot of it is speech-based as well. And so there's a lot of interaction. So in a nutshell, why this class? To go from good to great. And what is it about? Dynamic interaction.
Very good. Thank you, Professor Ann. We won't use time from today, but we will share with everybody the class detail later. Please just stay tuned in our WeChat group. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the college application program. Everybody knows, a lot of parents are already familiar with those programs. One thing I want to point out is we have a lot of students especially seniors, involve a lot of sessions. So this year we have limited spot. We're going to limit the number of seniors we're taking this year. So right now there's only limited spot. But we're still taking the younger student because their meeting is less frequent. So the earlier they start, the more beneficial they will be. And here is our 2023 admission result. Very similar to last year, we have a very good early decision result as well as very good regular result. I won't spend time to talk about it, but those information are in our groups in WeChat. And we, as usual, we still have the competition writing class and SAT bootcamp class. The schedule hasn't been finalized yet, so stay tuned in our group to get class information. Last, I want to introduce, most of the parents already know Professor Ann. And for those that hasn't come to our seminars, Professor Ann is an Ivy League graduate. He is also currently a teaching professor at Emory University in their business school. He is an admission evaluator, which is, I would say, more involving role in admission officer. He's been involved for the last 10 years in UPenn admission and Emory. Not only his application evaluator, he has also been the admission interviewer. He is also a scholarship interviewer for Emory's very prestigious scholarship. And at the same time, he is a published author, writer, and speaker. One thing I want to highlight is he has also been a career advisor for different colleges he's been involved with, even in some of the private sector corporate job. I think that is extremely important in college application. Not only he will get student target into their dream school, when he advises students, he also will have a longer vision from career perspective to look at the school choices as well as the major. So he brings a lot of experience from that perspective. I think that's very extremely valuable for students when they're choosing school, as well as consider the future and also career path. Professor Ann has also worked as a former corporate recruiter. With that, I want to talk about what are the topic for today. Application season has started, okay? 2023, I'm sorry, there's a typo there, to 2024 college application essential timeline. Professor Ann will talk about those essential timeline as well as essential task. Hopefully that gives everybody a very clear framework to go through this application season. He will also talk about some fatal errors to avoid in application process. He will also talk about the impact of recent SCOTUS affirmative action ruling on this year's admission process. And we're going to extend our Q&A as much as possible. I think parents also can learn from each other's questions, okay? With that, without further ado, Professor Ann, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Let me go ahead and, if you don't mind, let me go ahead and, I don't have a title slide, so let me talk a little bit to this first. So the part of the seminar that I was going to talk about was jump-starting the college admissions office, the college admissions process. And so if you think about the metaphor jumpstart, it's when your car is not running, but it should be. Okay, so if you have not yet started deeply into your college admissions process and you're a senior, then yeah, you're a car that should be running and you're not. Okay, so that's what this jump starting is about. So let me go ahead and start with sharing one slide that I prepared that I think will help really be the basis for an entire discussion for tonight. And I'm anxious to get mostly to the Q&A. I think in the past, I've not been able to cover a lot of the questions. And in my opinion, it's probably the main reason why you're here, to get your specific questions answered. So I'm anxious to do that. But let me start off with the jump starting plan. And so, Chai, can you confirm that you can see the slide that I'm attempting to show?
I can see your slide.
Okay,
Yeah.
you are able to
You
see?
can see
Okay.
the whole thing.
Okay, let me put it on.
Little bit black box on the top, but it doesn't impact.
Okay, I'm going to put it on full screen. Okay, so I've come up with this timeline, and the way that this reads, this is for rising seniors. If you look at the key up here, everything that's a light colored shade is for early decision applications, and the darker shade is for regular decision applications. We're right here at in around mid-August or so, and we're approaching end of August and September, which is when your senior year starts. You should have been having a pretty important and dynamic and fun-filled summer. Session 3 is the way a lot of admissions folks call it. The reason is the way we make our admissions decision is largely based on your 3 years, of course. And so we think of summer as just as important, though differently, as your regular academic year. So if there are questions about what should you have been doing over your summer, or what are some ways that you can think of, I did this over the summer, is it really that relevant? You know, I went on a family vacation, I picked up a personal hobby, I worked a job. You know, if there's certain things during your summer 3 that are important, then I hope you ask away. You'll notice also that this summer 3 extends beyond when the school year starts, and that's intentional because a lot of admissions folks, we acknowledge, we even expect, depending on the school, that whatever projects or things that you're doing over the summer indeed do carry off. A lot of times, very meaningful projects, they don't have simple, discrete, convenient finish times, and so a lot of times they do carry over, even for those who are in regular decision towards the end of the year and even into the new year. But as far as the senior year starting, until college starts here, down here, which is, you know, in the August-September range, okay, there are a couple of things, and Chai had mentioned in the slide some things that I was going to talk about. Fatal errors. I will address the Supreme Court ruling, or at least not only my opinion, but more importantly, what I've heard from other folks who are involved in admissions. And then even a couple of things, I think, Chai, in the flyer, there were some points about 3 primary aspects of the common application to work on, et cetera. But what I'd like to do is I want to spend most of my time on this one slide. And for those of you who maybe have not yet had time to think of specific questions, I'm guessing that my going through some of the fatal flaws and then important things to do, you know, might actually trigger some questions. Okay. But with that said, let me go through some of these key things. And Chai, I forgot to ask you, but would you like me to, you know, take questions as they come in interactively, or would you
I think it's better.
You rather me go ahead and go through, and then we'll take questions?
We will leave all the questions to the end.
To the end. Okay. All right.
So anyway, I think this timeline is pretty complex, and I want people to not distracted.
Okay, let me go ahead, and then I'll go ahead and go through this, but I'll do it briefly so I can get to the questions. So the common application, referred to as the common app. There's also the coalition app. Okay, and then depending on the state you're applying, for example, Texas, they have their own state application that's available. Some university systems, like the University of California Board of Regents system, if you you want to go to UCLA, UC Berkeley, Davis, etc., you really just apply to the UC system. So there are a lot of different applications, but the Common App is probably the main driver of a lot of this. If you haven't been writing on your Common App, then you are behind, so you need a jump start. Okay, there are 4 main areas that are going to be taking up the majority of your time. That's your essays, of course. What a lot of us refer to are the 10 boxes. Those are the activities that you list. The 5 awards, which means there are award boxes, and then the AI essay, which is the additional information essay. So those 4 are probably the most important drivers of the common application towards your admissions decision. The college applications writing as well. A lot of the schools this year, a lot of the colleges this year released their their applications a little bit early. Some of them actually have not yet released, and they usually do release by the first week of August. So my recommendation is, obviously, you need to have your target list nailed down. Doesn't have to be definitive yet. but you also really need to be thinking about the difference between ED, your early decision, your early actions, your SEA, your single early action, etc., your restrictive early action, and then your regular decisions. Okay, so you really need to be, deciding on those as well. How to go about deciding those is a common question I get. I get a lot of questions about whether or not the statistics actually do prove that there's a higher chance of getting in if you apply early. So I get a lot of questions about that. The SAT and ACT retakes, I get questions about super scores. Again, the lighter shading means you're intending to apply early. So if you look down in the footnotes, you have until December 2nd to continue to take your SATs in order to get the score in on time, depending on what the early decision deadline is. Okay, the application deadlines, generally speaking, again, these are, this is just for the majority of schools. There are some application deadlines that are middle of October, okay, but a lot of them are at the end of October, beginning November, and then the regular decisions are the first week of January. There is an interim status report or a progress report that you often have to give to the colleges if you haven't heard yet, and I get a lot of questions on, how high do my grades have to be? What's more important, for me to select challenging courses at the risk of my GPA, or for me to go ahead and pick easier courses so that my progress report to colleges, shows high grades? So I get a lot of those kinds of questions. What if I'm failing? What if I have a C? What do the admissions offices think, et cetera? I get a lot of those questions. The interviews, I get a lot of questions about that too. The interviews are becoming a whole lot more important in the admissions process. If you think about it, it makes sense. Imagine you're in an admissions committee and you're looking at a lot of committees do the applications, 5 applications at a time. Imagine you're looking at 5 applications. Everybody has high SAT scores. The teacher recommendation letters have all the same superlative adjectives. The extracurriculars show that you're the captain of this and president of that, and you've placed top 10 and this and that in the nation. The essays are all, equally well polished and very expressive. How can you tell the difference between these applicants? You really can't. You really have to look at nuances, but interviews are becoming an increasingly more effective way to differentiate. I liken it sometimes to those singing contests, right? Like American Idol or America's Got Talent. Okay, a lot of times you don't have to hear the whole song. You just, as soon as you hear that first note, you can set an immediate impression of a lot of things, okay, about a person's maturity level, how they think, how they express themselves, et cetera, even their confidence, okay, but the interviews are becoming a whole lot more important. What's interesting is if you Google, are the interviews important or not, you'll get both answers. And I get a lot of questions, which one is it? Okay, same thing with the essays up here in the Common App and the college applications writing, okay, application writing. I get a lot of questions, I've Googled, is the essay important or is it not important? And the answer is yes to both of those. So I get a lot of questions of when does it matter, when does it not? The decisions as well, they come out for the early applicants, they usually come around this period of time. And then for the regular decisions, they usually come around sometime in March, okay? Regardless, the colleges, the admissions offices will give you some time. It's generally the beginning of May to decide where to matriculate and pay your deposits. And then you got your last summer until your true young adult life begins. So that in a nutshell is the timeline for rising seniors. I encourage you to ponder this, and if any questions come to mind. I get a lot, I'd say the majority of the questions are up here in the common application and the college application writing. Okay, so particularly the, as I mentioned, the essay being one of the 4 components. But I cannot emphasize, for example, that 4th component that I mentioned, the AI essay, the additional information essay. Okay, that is, I get a lot of questions on that one because that's probably the one that I would say gets underutilized, okay, most frequently. But as far as the essay writing goes, I get a lot of questions about, how do I go about selecting which prompt I should write? How do I make sure that I've interpreted the prompt the way the prompt committee and the admissions committee wants me to, especially when there's so many different interpretations that you get when you Google. Okay. I get a lot of questions about what really does matter in terms of all of these in the holistic process. Okay. A lot of people talk about a neighbor or somebody's friend or son or somebody who got in last year. And so they think, well, if I do what that person did, then I should probably get in. Let me look at their essay. If they got into the such and such school, then let me look at their essay. Little do they know that a lot of time, I don't mean to laugh about it. I'm more amused by the irony. Little do a lot of applicants know that a lot of times it wasn't what's sometimes called a straight vote, which is where everybody in committee votes enthusiastically yes. A lot of times there are reservations, which is sometimes referred to as a split vote. And so a lot of split vote candidates think that everything that they did got them in, when the ironic truth is that they got in despite some things is most likely the case. So anyway, this is the timeline as far as jump-starting things. And then the one other thing that I was going to talk. Oh, yes.
Hold it for a second. I want to ask everyone, Professor N is screen sharing, and I can see his screen. Can you please let me know in the chat if you cannot see his screen?
Ooh, okay.
Can participant let me know, because I got a couple of parents saying that they cannot see the screen.
Oh, I apologize for that. I should have checked.
Okay. It says screen is black. So
okay, so a lot of people not able to see the screen. Okay, so why don't I do this? I'm going to switch then to my backup, which is going to be a document camera. So if you can give me about 60 seconds, Chai.
Okay,
I can do that if you would like me to do that. I can try to reshare it.
Okay.
Let me go ahead and try to reshare it one more time.
Yeah, it looks like they cannot see your screen. I apologize because I can see it, but
okay. So you were able to see it, but others were not. Okay, so let me see if this will work.
Apologize for having this issue because
are you able to? Okay, Chai, are you able to see that?
I can see it now. So okay. Can parents please type? Oh, Eileen, parent says the chat is disabled and they cannot see the screen sharing.
Okay, so then if you can give me about, I'd say 60 seconds, Chai, and then I'll switch to a document camera. Okay. So sorry about that. That's funny. We tried to, we tested it and it worked between us at least. But
yeah. At the same time, Eileen, can you please check if the chat is disabled? Parent says chat is disabled, and the panelists can see the screen, but other participants can.
Okay.
Just everybody know in the Q&A, that's where you can type to let us know. If you cannot type in the chat, please type in the Q&A, okay? Let me try to share my screen to see if you guys can see my screen. Now I am sharing my slide screen. Can parents give me a response? Can they see my screen sharing? Can you all see my slide?
Chai?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready to go ahead and use my document camera.
Okay, let me pause my share, allow you to share it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, stop share.
Oops. Okay.
Okay, now you can share.
Okay, are you able to see the document, Chai?
I can see it. But parents, can you see Professor N's? Oh, now it's black.
It's all black?
It's all black, yeah.
Okay. Well, then why don't I do this? Since we don't have visuals for today, I'm fine with that. And I'm happy to just answer questions if that works. And then, Chai, I don't think you have the visuals that I was originally intending to send. So I'm not sure why it's not working.
Eileen, can you, I think Professor, I can share my slide, but can you please check to see if there's any troubleshooting? You can, yeah.
Hi, Chai. Parents should supposed to put their question in the Q&A. I saw that a lot of parents put their questions. They can't see the screen.
Yeah, there is a Q&A.
Q&A. Yeah.
Are they able to see the screen now? Is anyone able to see the screen? Still no? Because I tried something different.
I cannot see now.
Steve,
Chai, can you?
before, Steve,
Uh-huh.
I said before it was working, Professor Ed, just want you to go back to your previous sharing. So maybe,
Okay.
yeah, right now it's the black screen. So whatever
right
you're
now?
sharing now, before, just share it.
Are
Maybe
you
some
able to see?
can
Okay,
see
are you
it.
able to see that?
Right now, I cannot.
Right now it's all black. Okay, let me.
Yeah, so
try
you
one
can
more
share
thing.
the way you started share before. Yeah, okay,
Are
yeah,
you able- Can you see that?
no, it's black. So however you receive it before, share it before when you started to talk about the timeline, you can reshare that slide.
Okay, let me do that then. So
Yeah, that is better because I can see it. Some parents can see it too. But do not worry, we apologize for the technical issue. At the end of the seminar, I'm going to share the PowerPoint to parents, send in our WeChat groups, okay?
hi, are you able to see that?
Yeah, I can see your screen and the slide.
Okay,
And parents, yeah, so I see
okay.
people saying I can see
So
it.
do you want me to just go ahead and start doing the Q&A?
Oh, no, I want you to finish the content. Then we go to Q&A as we originally planned. I think
Okay.
we can see your screen right now.
Okay, so for those who are able to see it, I'll try to speak in a little bit more descriptive ways. But the overall conclusion for the timeline for jumpstarting the application process for the rising seniors is that the 4 components of your application writing need to be in full swing. The other components, especially if you have questions about when you can redo things, especially SAT, ACT retakes, when AP scores might matter or not, when interviews might matter or not, et cetera, when you have to do the progress report, et cetera. You know, I can answer, I get a lot of the questions on those, and everything, deadlines, generally speaking, by the end of October or the beginning of November for early decisions, and then first week of January for regular decisions. There's a waiting period, and then you've got time to accept, and then you start school in August. So that's what the timeline, for those of you who are not able to see it, that's what it describes. I was going to go over the Supreme Court decision and what a lot of us in admissions have been talking about. Chai, would you like me to do that?
Yeah, just real
Okay.
quick. I think that's important.
Okay, so let me go ahead and also go to the other. Chai, are you able to see that?
Yes, we can
slide?
see it.
Okay, so for those of you who are able to see this slide, what it is it's a subjective description of how the Supreme Court ruling regarding affirmative action, and specifically that ruling does prohibit schools from using race as a direct factor in their admissions decision. And so what's been interesting is a lot of us who are involved in admissions have some pretty strong opinions and our own forecast of what we think the ripple effects are going to be, especially for this upcoming application season. So what I did was I created this chart to estimate subjectively what each component in the admissions process in your application as a student, how each one of those components is going to change in importance. Okay, so for example, the Supreme Court says colleges can no longer use race. Therefore, will the transcript become more important or less important, and so on. So that's how this works. So as far as the transcript, we generally think of them in 3 levels: your course selection, the grades, and then standardized testing scores. And all 3 of those have a different meaning. And so I get a lot of questions about those, especially which one's more important, you know, the AP score or my GPA, et cetera. The standardized tests, you know, those are the APs and the SATs. Those are going to become a whole lot more important now. Why? If somebody wants to know that, you feel free to ask away. The activities, these are both academic and extracurricular, okay, they absolutely will become more important. Teacher recommendations, not as much, they're very subjective. Essays and interviews will also become now more important. And again, these are not solely my personal opinion, because a lot of times, as I say, my personal opinion doesn't really mean much, but just based on my experience and exposure and my discussions with other people involved in admissions, then this is what I've subjectively come up with. It seems clear to me that essays and interviews will become a whole lot more important. That last row right here, or not the second to last, this non-race, the exogenous factors, non-race factors, therefore, a lot of us think are going to become a whole lot more important. The logic behind this is, imagine you were a school that used race as a very important determining factor in admissions. Well, most people would agree that for colleges, which of course are at their core academic intellectual institutions, to think of factors that are not focused on academics and intellectualism would mean that you're using a factor that's irrelevant. Since the Supreme Court has stated that admissions offices can no longer use race, then a lot of us believe, as cynical as this might sound, that a lot of these colleges then will look for other exogenous factors since they are no longer allowed to use race. Okay, so what might these exogenous factors be? Think of anything subjective that you like. Whether you are related to a celebrity, you're going to donate lots of money. If you are a legacy, you could include nepotism. Perhaps even things like, basically it's anything that you would think a college would want you for in order to justify this last assessment, which is, will race become less important, more important, or will there be no change based on the Supreme Court decision? Well, obviously, the Supreme Court stated that it is now illegal, because the act has been signed. It is now illegal, or it has been deemed in law. It is illegal to use race. So race not only must be less important, it must have no importance, according to the Supreme Court. But as we all know, we don't all live in a courtroom, do we? So the interesting question, and that's why this circle is hollow, is whether or not people really do think race will no longer be an issue. So obviously everybody has to abide by the law. So we all have to do what the Supreme Court has interpreted. Okay. But the real question is, what does that mean? Does that mean that Harvard a few years from now is going to be 85% Asian? I mean that somewhat euphemistically, but the real question is, or might it be the other way around? It's going to be 0% Asian now that they have to look at things like academics, right? So it could go either way, right? If we're being purely subjective. So that's why this is a hollow circle. So it's supposed to be zero importance, but it's hollow because who knows where it might actually end up being. And this last row indeed is the bottom line of what the Supreme Court of the United States was trying to get at. Okay, but of course, nobody really knows for sure. So the bottom line is this entire chart is speculative based on what people like me, are guessing. Okay, so I'm happy to take questions, Shai, now at this time. Did you want me to go back to that other timeline slide?
I think the fatal errors to avoid. Do you want to talk about that? Then we can.
Sure. I can. I didn't know how much you wanted me to go into detail for some of those, but there are a lot of fatal errors. I'd say, and I'll go through them briefly here so that I can get to some of the questions. But some of the fatal errors, for example, when dealing with Summer 3, even though it has passed, number one is not finishing certain things that are going to matter to admissions. Number two, I would say, is not doing certain things that are being neglected that admissions will really care about. So there are a couple of common themes, as I mentioned, that a lot of the folks in admissions will come together at the end of every season and will identify. And some examples of some of those themes, a big one is, for example, utility. Utility is a theme actually that Stanford came up with about 15, 20 years ago, and then a lot of us are now copying, because what it means is how useful are you with the things that you've studied and learned and are good at? Okay, and so a fatal error for summer 3 is not doing that, showing that you actually can put to use what you've learned and what you're good at. I'd say another thing with summer 3 is not showing it in a way in your application that's compelling to committee. Okay, a couple quick fatal errors under the common application writing. I think one of and remember the 4 main parts of the common application that really should be taking up your time. So go through them in that order. So with the essays, I would say fatal errors are prompt selection, the prompt interpretation, not writing with specific anecdotes, ignoring the writing style, underestimating the risk of your essay not being read for certain reasons. Fatal errors for I would say the achievements, which you have only 10 boxes to talk about in your common application, are really just picking 10 activities and putting them in 10 boxes, when in reality, you should be very selectively consolidating certain activities and then rewriting them, because the common application allows only 150 characters, which is really just 1 sentence. And if you have to do that, then you obviously have to distill about 3 or 4 activities into 1 sentence. And so not doing that properly. I would say some of the other parts of the application, not selecting the appropriate awards. And I would say a fatal error in the AI essay is not doing it, or trying to write the additional information essay with an inappropriate topic, because that also will hurt the other parts of your application. Is similar fatal errors for the college applications writing. As far as SAT and ACT retakes, if I had to point to a fatal flaw in the standardized test retakes, it's chasing after a number that you don't need anymore. Okay, because of the holistic process, 1380, 1400 is just fine. Admissions isn't going to care if you have a 1580 or a 1380. Okay, but in some cases, it really does make sense to chase after a few more points. Another fatal error I would say is, you're going to waste a lot of time not focusing on, I think, more effective ways to improve the scores. A lot of times you have to score only, you have to answer, I'd say only maybe 3 or 4 more math questions to get about 40, sometimes 60 points more. Same with the verbal. Okay, how to go about improving, how to go about self-studying. I wouldn't say taking academies and tutoring is a fatal error, but I think a fatal error is not considering other ways to study beyond just academies and tutoring. As far as application deadlines, I'd say the fatal error is thinking that applying early has a significant impact in increasing the probability of you being accepted. And so the fatal error often also is submitting an application that is not what you think is the best, just to get it in early. Okay, but that absolutely is a fatal error. Progress report to colleges, interviews. For the interviews, I'd say not preparing is a fatal error. And underestimating the questions that most of the time you can anticipate. There's one thing in here that I didn't mention that's not listed, which is the teacher recommendations. And I would say that there's a common fatal error in the teacher recommendations. The problem is most students think, how do I pick my teacher? Well, if I did well in the class, in other words, I had a high grade in the class, and we, got along pretty well. Maybe we laughed at each other's jokes. Okay, that must be a good teacher. No, that's a fatal error. I would say I would estimate that maybe 10% of teacher recommendation letters are negative, actually. And I know a lot of students are probably thinking, well, I'm not that I'm not that stupid that I would pick a teacher who's going to write something negative about me. That's my point. You're not going to expect a teacher to write something negative about you. And that's the fatal error, because you didn't go about picking the appropriate teacher. There are a lot of things that get written in teacher recommendation letters that can really torpedo or significantly hurt an application. Okay. And so I get a lot of questions about those, because if you Google, does a teacher recommendation letter matter or not? Again, you're going to find both answers, and I get questions as to which one isn't. Okay, so those are, I would say, the main fatal errors, Chai. I hope that leaves at least some time for me to answer some questions as well.
Yeah, so
Okay.
for now, we're going to go to the questions. Parents, I think if you are not able to use chat, if it's disabled, please put your question in Q&A, and we're going to take the question in order. And Professor Ed, right now, Lucy summarized, there were a lot of like non-question things in the chat. So Lucy has summarized the question in the chat. So if you can go to chat, you can go through, start from the top, you have the questions there. So we'll start question there, but parents, you can continue to use Q&A to send in questions. Okay, we're going to go through them in orders.
Okay, so I'll read them out. The first one is, I reveal that I am of Chinese descent. Could this hurt my application in the personal statement? Is that what you're also reading is the first question?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the first
Okay,
question.
I just want to make sure I'm reading through the right thing.
Okay.
So the simple answer is no. Okay, they're already going to know that you're of Chinese descent, usually because, looking at your last name. And my personal opinion doesn't matter, so I won't even state it. I think some people might argue, well, isn't that racist? Isn't that focusing on ethnicity? Of course it is. Okay, welcome to the real world. I'm not saying that colleges actually do this, and I don't have any empirical evidence or data to say this, okay? But again, I am not going to be surprised if the percentage allocations are not going to change a whole lot, okay? I mean, if indeed the Supreme Court decision were held up and college admissions offices were allowed to look only at academic and other related qualifications, and there are subjective things, right? Like leadership, congeniality, etc. But still, I, like many others, wonder if there really is going to be a big change. Are you really going to have, and like I said, suddenly there's not going to be any Asian people in Ivy League schools, or are they all going to be 99% Asian people? Or is it going to be something in between? Okay, but you're in the worst category as an Asian person, whether you're Chinese, Korean, Japanese, it doesn't matter. Worst meaning most competitive. Okay, there's a reason why the people who used to promote inclusion and diversity now caveat that by saying inclusion and diversity of underrepresented minorities. Why don't you just say Asian, right? Okay. But anyway, number two is, Professor, do you have any advice on applying to Brown University? I think that's too generic of a question, because you don't need me to say, focus on your SAT or your standardized scores and talk about how you studied hard and enjoyed learning, etc. There are a lot of themes that I did mention, okay, that admissions committees every year when we gather together, or when a lot of us just kind of trade ideas informally, a lot of these things are pretty consistent. So I mentioned utility is one of them, convergence is another, intrinsic motivation, intellectual curiosity, okay, initiative, intellectual adventurism, okay? So there are a lot of these types of themes that are important for you to show. Okay, extended applications is another one. Okay, so these are all things that that I work with students through Blue Ivy to focus on, so we actually can make a strong application for, in your case, people who want to apply to Brown, okay, and so on. Brown, by the way, has some pretty unique programs. So my advice to you on applying to Brown is know Brown well, as you should with every school. Okay, so you should know, for example, that if you don't want to, you don't have to take courses for grades. Okay, it's pretty unique for not only any Ivy, but for any college. Okay, Brown's also in a very unique part of town, right? So Providence, small city, smallest state, etc. Okay, but they have a lot of affiliations because they're very close to Boston. I heard Boston has a couple of good schools too. Okay, so you really need to understand Brown. Brown has an accelerated BSMD EAP program, so if you're interested in medical school and so on. Okay, so I think my overall advice is twofold. Know Brown well, and know your background well, so you can promote yourself well. But, I wouldn't be able to get into more detail, obviously, without knowing you more in detail. And so I suppose that's why Chai, Blue and I, we work together, right? So working with specific students, we can get more into the specifics. That is only two questions so far. How to decide whether to take SAT or ACT or both. The SAT, the official answer is you can take either one, or you can decide to not take them if you look at the school's application and it says it's optional. Okay, The reality of it in terms of many admissions perspectives is you have to take it, even if the college says that you don't have to. Okay, so for those of you students who think, oh, good, it says optional, I don't have to take it. The problem is admissions is not it's a relative process, not an absolute process. That means that admissions committees do not accept every student that's qualified. Admissions committees select the limited number of students who are most qualified. Okay, so one of the common themes, as I mentioned, is we all lament over how many, literally thousands of students who we know would do very well at our schools, we still have to reject. I mean, it's tragic if you think about it. So anyway, SAT or ACT or both, I know you didn't say or neither, but that is a common question I get. So you have to take it. In terms of which one, the SAT, at least in my experience and from what I've heard, okay, is more valuable and more useful because the scale is a little bit more, I'll call it graduated, okay, because the difference between a 35 and a 36, okay, there actually can be a much bigger difference in those two, a bigger range of students, as opposed to a 1600, a 1590, or even a 1580 and a 1560, and so on. Okay, so in short, you have more numbers in the SAT than you do in the ACT. So when you have more data, you can measure more specifically. Okay, both of those make things equally easy to compare. There are some folks, I depending on what your application looks like, I actually will sometimes recommend, okay, that you take both. And the reason behind that is some admissions people I've noticed, and this is from some of my direct conversations, they'll say, if you do not take the SAT and you do take the ACT, well, then it shows that you might be afraid that you're going to score low. Okay, because think about it. Suppose you were 100% sure somehow magically that you were going to have a perfect score in both of those. Would you take them? Of course you would, right? If you knew, right, hypothetically, you were going to get a perfect score. Okay, and so think of it vice versa. Okay, so anyway, so that's my answer to that. Chai, I don't see the next, let me scroll down. Okay, so the next question I have is, my child would like to pursue engineering. He takes STEM very seriously. BC in 10th grade. Should he take more advanced math in community college, like multivariate, or stop taking advanced math and do other things like science fair, etc.? He won't have a solid understanding. Okay, so there are 3 or 4 things actually that I would like to address in this. Number one, the thing that jumps out immediately to me, the basis of this question reveals something very negative for you. So you want to make sure you do not convey the following to anybody in admissions. The nature of this question reveals that you think your time, effort, and concentration are a zero-sum game, or somehow because you put more effort into one thing, it takes away from the other. Never, ever express that, okay, to a college admissions office in any way, your essay, your interview, and your activities, etc. Okay, so you can always make more time. It's a matter of priorities. That's number one. Number two is the course itself isn't as important as you challenging yourself. The admissions committees generally want a minimum level of aptitude and acumen, okay? But once we surpass that, we just want to see that you challenge yourself. This is how you have students, and if my camera were working, Chai, I could show this, but this is how you have students who are at MIT, Stanford, even Caltech, who have SATs that are actually considered quote unquote low or on the lower end in the high 1300s, okay? Who are still getting in, and then people who have perfect scores who get rejected. Okay, so it's not necessarily the course selection and the grades that you get. In terms of the courses, there are a lot of schools that don't even enable you because they don't have the qualified teachers. Some of them just have their own restrictive policies, especially some of these private schools. Some schools you're not allowed to even take an AP course until 11th grade. Some schools are parochial. Imagine homeschool children. They don't even have an AP course to take. Okay. I mentioned there were 3 or 4 things that I wanted to address. So that was the second thing that I wanted to address. Focus more on being challenged rather than the course itself. Okay. So that was the second thing. The first thing being your time and effort's not a zero-sum game. The third thing I was going to mention was taking the AP exam and taking the course are two different things. Okay, so I get this question a lot. You need to understand that the admissions office is like the hub. They're the ones who are going to make the decision. Okay, of course, the high school doesn't make the decision. Your teacher who's writing your recommendation doesn't make the decision, etc. Only the admissions office does. So imagine a hub with a bunch of spokes. So the hub is the Office of Admissions of, say, MIT. Okay. High school, your high school is just one spoke on that hub. So your high school is going to send the transcript, et cetera. They also have to show that you earned enough credits to graduate high school. Okay. Imagine your teachers being another hub on that, another spoke on that, going to that hub. So your teachers write a teacher recommendation. Those recommendations go straight to the hub, to the admissions office. They do not go to your guidance counselor and it gets reviewed, et cetera. Okay, imagine another spoke on that hub is the College Board, right? The College Board runs the AP exams and the SATs, right? They don't have to approve anything for your high school, et cetera. You go, you take the College Board exam, and then the College Board sends that score to whomever you want it to be sent. Okay, so one of those other spokes on your hub is dual enrollment, or in this case, advanced math from a community college. Okay, the only time that your high school becomes relevant is whether or not that high school will acknowledge the work done at such and such dual enrollment college in order to grant high school graduation credit. Okay, but as far as the admissions committee is concerned, we just want to see that you have a requisite level of aptitude and acumen, and then also you challenge yourself. And so if you challenge yourself by taking a course at a community college, we don't care if your high school gives you graduation credit or not. We care if you graduate from high school, of course, because you have to do that. Okay. But what we love to see is you pushing yourself. And if that means going to another college, then so be it. And a lot of these dual enrollments are in non-accredited, or they are accredited as universities, but they are not accredited, or the high school does not give you graduation credit for them. The admissions committee doesn't care. Okay. I'd say, and I mentioned there were 3 or 4 things that were coming out of this. The other thing is, as far as your activities go, the other thing that's revealed to me here is, it's clear to me that the student or the person who's asking this, I guess it's a parent, is thinking of the high school as the arena within which the student performs and then proves that they deserve to go to such and such school. The high school is only one context within which the student, within which your child performs. The admissions committee is looking for a lot of other contexts in which your child performs. So if all your child is doing is taking courses within the high school, taking community college courses that only the high school only accredits, doing activities that are only in the high school, then you might even want to ask yourself, even if you were in the admissions office, would you really want a student who so significantly restrictively limits their opportunity to challenge themselves? Okay, so colleges prefer high school students that are willing to push themselves, not come, take it easy, take easy courses, not have to work hard, not stress, right? I mean, I know that sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised at how many applications we see where somebody did, say, a B+ in honors pre-calc, and they decided to take AB because they were afraid if they took BC, they might get a 78 in their grade. Well, guess what? We don't care if it's a 78 if your AP exam is a 4 or 5. Okay. By the way, you'll never hear anybody say that officially. Like when I visit your college, I've got my little UPenn Ivy League badge on. We don't say that kind of stuff. But in terms of the reality of it, how is it perceived? A lot of high schools, unfortunately, are even known to what we call inflate grades, grade inflation, right? I mean, think about it. If there are some high schools that have, say, everybody's got a perfect 4.0 GPA, but all the SATs are 1100, right? You need to kind of wonder, well, what's going on with GPAs? Anyway, those were 4 or 5 things that I immediately caught in this one kind of loaded question. Chai, I apologize for going on and on. So do you want me to keep going, but I'll go a whole lot faster? Chai, I can't hear you. I think your mic is off. Chai, I think your mic is off.
Okay.
There we go.
Let's keep going, Professor, if your time allows, because we have some technical issue delay. So I do see a lot of questions come. So I think parents will benefit from your.
Okay, let me try to then get through some of these more succinctly. Maybe I spent too much time on that last one, but there are 4 or 5 things in that one. Okay. What differences will the new? Okay, so what differences will the new online SAT have for scores and study? No difference. Okay. Would you suggest students to participate, prepare for competitions during the summer, or do activities that students enjoy? Actually, not only both. So competitions, they should be doing whatever camps. They should be doing things that they enjoy. Hopefully they enjoy those camps. Okay. If you look at some of the applications, a lot of the questions focus on what do you do beyond organized camps, courses, and activities, organized activities, like math team, robotics club, Sci-Ollie. What do you do beyond that? If you look at the Harvard application, for example, it says our life or your life goes beyond the structure of the school. We want to know how else do you pursue things beyond organized activities. Okay, so you should be, so you should really be pursuing intellectual things, based on one of those themes I mentioned earlier, which was intrinsic motivation. Okay. Getting jobs and internships, doing self-initiated projects. There are a lot of projects that I recommend people do, especially that focus on some of those key, those issues that we cover in admissions. How important is research and publications? It's not important that you do them necessarily, but it is strong evidence that you're a certain type of student. Okay, that again has the intellectual curiosity and the intrinsic motivation, etc., and also that you are at a certain level. Okay, how to decide which teacher to ask for teacher recommendations? That's actually a pretty loaded question. So, number one, don't automatically go for the one with the high grade and you like each other. Number two, try to imagine what the teacher is going to say about you. Number three, make sure your teacher does say some of the following, and these are just some things that I remember from reading thousands of these letters. So-and-so always raises his or her hand, not just for questions, but to contribute to the class discussion. So-and-so reads chapters that are not assigned in the book. So-and-so comes to extra help sessions, but not for extra help, but because they're curious about, something. So-and-so came to me with an article about something that we just studied in this class or something. Okay. And then the last thing is make sure your teacher does not say any of the following, because these will really hurt you. Okay. So this is what I mean by the teacher recommendation letter matters and it doesn't matter. So these will make it matter a lot because it's going to really hurt your application. If the teacher says any of the following, so-and-so is clearly very intelligent, therefore he seems to not put much effort. That's the comment of death in your letter. And we get a lot of that kind of letter, especially, because you are so smart, you probably are bored. Okay. So we get a lot of that kind of comment. So-and-so, I wish so-and-so is clearly a creative thinker. And so I'm often frustrated that so-and-so does not contribute more to the class discussion. I know so-and-so always has the answer, but they never seem to want to help, never seem to want to speak up. We often do group projects in class. I encourage students to work with other students, but so-and-so doesn't seem to interact very well. These are all actual comments, folks, and these are comments of death. Okay, so, you might think that you're doing great in the class, and the teacher is frustrated that because you're so smart, they actually blackball you in that letter. So be careful of that. Okay. You also want to make sure that your teacher selection, you tell us two things with the teacher selection. You obviously tell us who we assume you thinks highly of you. Okay. You also tell us that whoever you did not pick is someone that you do not think thinks that highly of you. For example, if your whole application shows math team, Millennium Problem, nothing but math, USAMO, etc., Amy, everything. But your math teacher is not your teacher recommendation, that's going to be flagged because that looks, very suspicious. Okay. So anyway, there are a lot of other things that go in, but sorry, Chai, let me move on. Or did you want me to move on?
Yeah, move on.
Okay, all right. So I'm sorry. I'll try to keep I'm too verbose is my problem. I'm grateful for your, my son is 7th grade. What steps, okay, so this is really for rising seniors, but I'm in 7th grade. What steps can we take to prepare applications? Your insights would be, yeah, I actually, the youngest student I think I've worked with, believe it or not, was in 4th grade. Okay, I know that sounds crazy, but you know, it really depends on what it is you're working on. Okay, so it is impossible for me to give you a laundry list of things to do. Okay, but if I were to suggest at least a few things. Number one, focus on what I call critical thinking. Okay, I know he probably does well in his grades, and I'm sure he does all his homework. But as you know, if you want to eventually be a top 5% student, you really don't know if you're top 5% if you're above the 50% line, you know, in just a regular school. The second thing is I would suggest that your 7th grader, and I actually recommend this to all my middle school students, which is to go ahead and take a peek. Don't spend more than 5 minutes, but just take a peek at the Common App essay questions and take one college and look at the website just to see what is college. It's kind of like looking, you know, asking an elementary school kid, oh, you want to be a fireman or astronaut? Well, why don't you go to, you know, the fire department website or the NASA website, just to get a taste of what it is you think you might like. That way they start thinking of it early. The third and final thing I'll say to your 7th grader, or to you as the parents of the 7th grader, is to not start putting the pressure about any particular college, especially an Ivy League or anything. They need to focus more on what gets you into college, not the name of the college. To me, I think that's I'm not making a parenting decision. I respect everyone's different parenting style, but in terms of getting into a college, focusing on the name is not the way. You need to focus on what it is that gets you into the college. The next question, should I go on, Shai?
Yes, keep
Okay,
going.
so,
And parents, if you're running out of time, but if you want to stay, but we're going to stay a little bit longer to help.
Yeah. Okay, so an appropriate topic for an AI, this is something that I cover actually a lot, but it could be something like, and these are AI essays that I've even read that have been taken very, very seriously. Some students, maybe a parent dies, and now the student has to go to work starting, you know, in junior year of high school and contribute to the rent. Maybe we get a lot of natural disasters, you know, somebody's house burned down, a tornado. I read one application. She was an applicant from Yemen. Her village was bombed during the war. So we get a lot of those. Certain sicknesses. I read an essay, someone who injured her back and was in a wheelchair, had to skip her entire half of her junior year, moving around from school to school to school. Especially, we get a lot of military essays. You have to move every 2 years. If something happened outside of your control at the school, you know, there was some scandal, or the principal got fired, or the school disappeared, that kind of thing. So there are a lot of these kinds of events that can affect, and there's got to be at least two dozen of these things. So I've got a long list of these things that I've seen, but the best way is really just to ask someone. Okay, so if you think you have a situation, just ask. Okay, is taking the ACT on October 28th too late for ED? I actually don't know, because I don't know how fast they electronically score it. Okay, but because ED deadlines, a lot of them are October 31st and November 1st, I only have a guess as to whether or not it's too late. And I generally don't like to guess. I like to be sure, so I'm not even going to tell you what I think. Okay, I'm sure you can guess. If I take AP class at school and get high grade, do I have to take AP? Absolutely. Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, first of all, your grade in your AP class doesn't matter that much. Okay, we get a lot of high AP grades and low AP scores. Okay, if you go to these college, college days and where a representative of the school visits your school and you ask that question, we all say the same official answer, okay, which is, oh, we want them both to be high, the grade and the AP score. Okay, the reality of it, though, is if you have to pick one, the score is way up here. The grade in the class isn't even on the list. Okay, because of number one, grade inflation. Okay, number two, the score, the AP score standardized. Okay, number three, if you do not take the test, this is the way there's somebody called a transcript evaluator in a lot of schools. So depending on where your application is, it's going to get chopped up into pieces. And then somebody like me has to, read around 800 or 900 transcripts for that year, or maybe 2,000 essays or whatever. So your transcript reviewer is going to immediately flag the following. If you do not take the test, but they see that you took the AP course, they will assume, number one, that you have no confidence in the test, because why would you not take the test if you thought you were going to make a 4 or 5? Okay. And then number two, they're going to assume there's something going on with the grade too. Okay. Number three, they might assume, and I'm not going to say they will, I should say they could. Okay. The third thing is that they may assume that you are, how should I call it? I wouldn't say the worst kind of superficially motivated student. So I'm not going to say that, right? But that you're not going to have intrinsic motivation. Okay, so there's slang for students like that. They're called grade chasers, okay, like trophy chasers, etc. And as you can imagine, no college is interested in that kind of student. The college is interested in students who are going to push themselves, okay? So the ideal, and the last comment I'll say to this one, the ideal is if you do not take the course, but you still took the AP exam. Okay, so there are a number of those courses that I recommend. If you know, I work with you with through Blue Ivy, there are certain courses that I would specifically recommend because the transcript reviewer is looking for that. Okay, I think an easy, obvious one is if you're Chinese and if you can speak, read, and write fluently, then you absolutely should take that AP Chinese exam in 8th grade. Okay, don't take the AP Chinese course, because if you do, that's going to be interpreted in another really bad way. Okay, so a lot of people think, oh, good, you know what, I can get the easy A and I can take Chinese 1, 2, and 3 and take AP and get a 5 when I'm a senior. You have no idea how much that's going to hurt you. Okay, if you already did that and you're a senior, there are ways to work around that in terms of other parts of your application. Okay. And again, that's stuff that, you know, that I suppose, you know, I cover with some of the students. Chai, I think I have maybe time for 1 or 2 more. Did you want me to go ahead? Okay. All right. So the next question I see is, how do I ask for a teacher rec? If you don't mind, since I've already done teacher rec letters, I'm going to move on. So let's see. Oh, something's wrong with my mouse. Okay. So we live in small.
The question says for the comment app.
Okay, here it is.
The question is optional.
Yeah, I see it. Is if the question is optional, should I respond? It depends on what the optional question is. So in the comment app, they have the AI, which is the additional information one. That one, I recommend, depending on your background, I recommend you try to put something in there, because it can hurt you depending on what you write and how you write it. For example, you don't want to be a victim card player. You don't want to be somebody that the slang is blame and justifier. You don't want to be that kind of writer. Okay, but that AI, the additional information optional essay, is a really good opportunity to strengthen your essay. You'll notice there are 2 topics in that AI, the additional information essay. One is qualifications and the other one is circumstances. Okay, the word says or, so you have to pick one. So deciding which one is important, and then how you write on that one is also, you know, can also help you a lot. Okay, it's also good because a lot of students do not take advantage of that. And as I said, it's a comparative process. It's not an absolute one. Okay, so you need to beat the next person. You can't just be great. You need to be able to beat out the other applicant. We live in a smaller state. My child has won top 3 since 7th. He's not advanced to international. If his goal is engineering, is it sufficient to just win state and leave of the state level science race? Is it sufficient? It's sufficient. I'll say it this way. Number one, yes, because one data point is never going to get you accepted or rejected. Number two, I've worked with students who have done far less than even at the state level, who have gotten into a lot of the STEM schools. The STEM schools are Princeton, MIT, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon, NYU, you know, so don't think that just because you're at the state or not, that one thing is never going to make a difference. The third thing I'll say is look up what the holistic process is. I think that'll help you answer the question. The fourth thing is there are many, many other ways to not only challenge yourself, or for your 7th grader to challenge him or herself, but also to prove, okay, their acumen and aptitude and how aggressively they want to pursue, not academically, but pursue intellectually, okay, what they're interested in. So there are a lot of ways to do that besides just doing these state competitions and things, okay. 1560 is good SAT score. Should my child retake the test? My suggestion is no. As a matter of fact, and here's an irony, sometimes a high score can raise a red flag against you in the admissions process. Suppose you get a 1560, but you've been taking all on-level and honors classes. Okay. Oh, and your grades are B and B minus. That 1560 is really going to hurt you because no one makes a 1560 by accident. Okay. If you're smart, you may accidentally score low. You know, you had a bad day, a headache. But if you're stupid, you cannot accidentally score 1560. So 1560 means, wow, your aptitude is somewhere here. Okay. That means your course selection, your activities, okay, everything else needs to show that you really push yourself. Okay. So don't retake the test. You don't need to, but don't think of only that one number and I'm done. Okay. That's not how the holistic process works. And then Chai, I can take one last one if you want me to. Do you want to? Okay. I was just gonna, do you care which one I have?
I don't care which one.
Okay.
You can just pick the during enrollment.
Okay, so let's see. So the dual enrollment isn't important. Yes, just to show that you're pushing yourself. Don't worry about whether or not you get credits from your high school, as long as you still have enough credits to graduate. And since that was so fast, I'll do one last one. You know, so because I feel bad because of I didn't get the technology working, and so I burned up a lot of time. But what the fourth factor that included in non-race exogenous besides related, it's not just a fourth. It's anything that's subjective. Okay, so it could even be, you know, like it could be nepotism, it could be your athletics, you could be an amazing dancer, you could be an artist, it could be anything that is exceptional that's not necessarily directly related to the academic core requirements that still gets you in. Okay, okay, yeah, I see that. Yeah, there are too many for me to keep going. So if you don't mind, Chai, I think I'll stop right there.
Okay, yeah, unfortunately, we have extended. I think the question is just going to keep coming. Thanks everyone for attending our seminar. We will try to have future seminars, trying to attend the seminar and trying to put your questions earlier. Professor, I really appreciate your time. It's very valuable. So we're going to make the recording also available. There's a lot of parents that have conflict, so we'll make it available. If you have any...
Yeah, sorry about the technology. Yeah,
sorry about that. And if you have additional questions or help, you can reach out to me in the WeChat group. I will try to help you as much as I can, okay? Thanks everyone for your time, for attending, and especially thanks Professor Ann for your time as well.
Thanks for having me.
Have a very good evening, okay?
Good night, everyone.
Good night.